Sustainability is central to everything we do at Enbridge. That's why we've committed to net zero GHG emissions by the year 2050. We deliver the energy that fuels quality of life, safely, responsibly, and sustainably.
Distinguished guests, welcome to the 2023 State of the State Address to the Business Community, presented by Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan. Please welcome the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Detroit Regional Chamber, Sandy Barua.
Good morning. Awesome to see you. What a great looking crowd. Thank you so much for taking your valuable time to spend it with us, the Detroit Regional Chamber, and of course, our great governor of the state of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer. We are so proud to be the annual host of the State of the State by the governor of Michigan to the Detroit business community, and thank you for being part of this annual tradition. And we're also so very, very proud to be longtime partners with our dear friends at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan for this event. And I particularly want to thank the chair and CEO of Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan, Mr. Dan Lepp. And Dan, thank you so much for all that Blue Cross does and all that you do, Dan, personally, for our state and our community. We're delighted to be your longtime friends and partners. I also want to thank the sponsors of this event that have made this beautiful lunch possible, this beautiful venue possible, and they are Kroger, Visit Detroit, First Merchants Bank, and Enbridge, and the Wright, which used to be called the Wright Museum and is just now known as the Wright. So thank you to all of our friends and partners to make this event possible. You know, I cannot think of anybody who better embodies the spirit and the values of the state of Michigan than Gretchen Whitmer. Hard work, check. Understands every corner of this state and its economy and its values, check. A love of sports, check, check. Apparently, especially if you're an MSU fan, but I will leave that for others to judge. And I don't know if the governor even knows this. I went to the other green school. I went to the University of Oregon. So I get the green thing. A love of the outdoors and Michigan's incredible natural assets, check, check. Relentless energy, and my favorite, unfailingly good humor, no matter what's going on. But it's so much more than that. She has led our state during unprecedented challenges. The 100-year COVID-19 pandemic, historic dam break, unprecedented weather-related challenges, supply chain issues ranging from baby formula to computer chips. But through it all, Michigan outperformed the nation. The days of when the United States caught a cold and Michigan got the flu are over. Michigan was rated by Bloomberg, of all people, as the #1 state for economic resiliency through the pandemic. Michigan's GDP growth outpaced the nation's. At the end of 2022, the Detroit region had a lower unemployment rate than the nation as a whole, and the nation is at a historic low itself. We are getting our act together around economic development, an area in which we are so proud to partner with the governor and her team, along with things like the expansion of the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act and the expansion of the Earned Income Tax Credit, the expansion of our educational and skill base, achieving 60% of our adults in the state of Michigan with a 2-year, 4-year, or skilled certificate. We are so proud to be partnered with the Whitmer administration on all of these issues and more. So, ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Michigan's Chief Executive Officer, the Honorable Gretchen Whitmer. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. I appreciate that so much. That's such a wonderful introduction, Sandy. I can't tell you how much it means to me. I would just submit that perhaps we should add challenges. We should add unidentified flying objects as well over Lake Huron. I'm going to just make a joke. We don't know yet what it was, and as soon as we do, we will share that information. But I'm very glad to be here with all of you, and I'm glad that we are safe and that Lake Huron is as well. And as we have more information, we will certainly share that. It has been a busy day, much less a busy week, and certainly a busy year. And before we know it, we will all be at the Mackinac Policy Conference together. I just made the stress level of your whole team go up, Sandy, with that. Since I took my oath of office, we have been hustling. 2023 is off to a roaring start, and the new legislature, the leadership, I am so grateful to be working with people like Speaker Joe Tate, Senate Majority Leader Winnie Brinks, as well as leaders Hall and Nesbitt. I think that we are going to get a lot accomplished, and some of the legislature is telling me they're overwhelmed and we're moving too fast, and to that I just smile and say, suck it up. We got a lot to do. We learned we had, just last month, a $9.2 billion surplus. We also in the same month won $918 million investment from General Motors in 4 different Michigan plants. Last month I signed a $1 billion supplemental to build housing, to remove blight, to fund community revitalization projects, and expand apprenticeships. It's the earliest a governor has signed a bill with a new legislature since 1947. So now you know why some of those legislators are feeling hustled. I signed an executive directive to boost diversity in state contracting and an executive order to help us move faster to build more affordable housing, because we know that is a need whether you are in Detroit or you're in the Upper Peninsula. And the legislature is moving forward on 2 tax changes, rolling back the retirement tax and quintupling the working families tax credit. This used to be known as the Earned Income Tax Credit, and is a tax credit for people who are working full-time but aren't making enough to keep their head above water. And I want to thank you, the Chamber, and so many of your members for your advocacy and your testimony. I know that we are on the cusp of getting it done. And last month, I delivered my State of the State address, where I shared several goals, including many that I know we share, like powering economic development, expanding talent efforts, and delivering pre-K universally, and so much more. So to build on all of this good work and to keep our momentum going, I introduced my budget proposal last week. It will lower costs, grow our economy, and help us build a brighter future for everyone who is calling Michigan home and who we want to move here and to call Michigan home. So there's plenty of specifics I could get into. It's over $80 billion, so I'm not going to go through line by line, but I do want to highlight some aspects of it for you. Because budgets are not just about addressing problems, it's about leading with your values. Whether it's your home budget or your budget at your workplace, it tells you what you need and what is important. So today I want to share a few of the problems and values that informed the work in the budget that I've just introduced. So we know that costs are high and that Michiganders need immediate relief. We know inflation has meant the margin for so many families in Michigan. I'm looking forward to signing legislation that'll boost the working families tax credit from 6% to 30% of the federal credit. Now, a 30% match delivers an average refund of $3,150 to 700,000 families in Michigan. And the best part of when we focus on this policy, half the kids in Michigan live in these households. 1 million Michigan kids. And so that's hundreds of millions back in the pockets of families that are raising half the kids in our state and are working full-time but can't keep their head above water. Second, we know that if your stomach's growling, it's hard to focus on anything. So, in order to address hunger for our children, I'm proposing free breakfast and lunch for all 1.4 million public school students in Michigan. We get this done, we will be just the 4th state in the nation to focus on this. And it'll also mean savings for families who are living paycheck to paycheck and are struggling to pay the bills. We also know that all people need a good path to a good paying job. So I am proposing that we build on the success we've had with the Michigan Reconnect, and the Chamber was an important partner in getting that done. It's our upskilling program for people 25 and older in Michigan. If we lower that age to 21, we can expand access for 350,000 young people and continue funding our Going Pro effort, apprenticeships, retraining, and retooling for small manufacturers. These are investments in our workforce that will pay off for business and individuals alike. We also know that higher education is financially out of reach for many working class families. And so continuing to support the bipartisan Michigan Achievement Scholarship that we started last year. This lowers the cost of college, community college or private university or public university, by thousands of dollars a year. Starting with the class of 2023, that's the kids that are going to graduate in a couple of months, 65% of the students will be able to attend tuition free in the fall when combining this scholarship with federal aid. And we also know that childcare is essential for working parents. I'm proposing that we build on the record of bipartisan investments that we made in childcare over the last 2 years by helping parents going back to work, so knowing that their kids are safe and in an environment where they are learning, and of course, helping that parent as well when it comes to the family budget. We started TRICARE, where the state picks up 1/3 of the cost, and an employer picks up 1/3, and the parent picks up 1/3. This budget proposes expanding on that. We also have the ability to expand our work when it comes to electric vehicles. We know that individuals can save money when they too make the transition from internal combustion engine to an electric vehicle. But we also know that the purchase price is too high a barrier for many. And so we are proposing a sales tax cut of up to $2,400 on electric vehicles. This will be offered at the point of sale so that people save money as they're walking out of the dealership and can participate in the transition and own a much cheaper, over the life of it, electric vehicle. And it's good for the Michigan economy, good for our climate, and most importantly, good for the owners of the vehicle. Lowering emissions lowers energy costs and helps us tackle climate change head on. This budget includes tax credits for manufacturers to reduce emissions, resources for families and small businesses to switch to clean energy, and electrifies the state fleet. We got to live our values in government if we expect other people to rise to the moment. And so that is a part of this budget as well. And infrastructure is invaluable for our health, our safety, and our economic growth. The budget has funding for at least 200 more bridges, replacing 40,000 lead service lines, and installing hundreds of electric vehicle chargers all across the state. So we're building on the work that we've done over the last 4 years to fix the damn roads, to bring them into this moment to be able to test these vehicles of the future on it and ensure that Michigan continues to lead in mobility. So we're going to keep moving dirt and getting it done. And finally, we know that bigotry is bad for business. Expanding Elliott Larson's Civil Rights Act, so you can't be fired or evicted for who you are or who you love. Getting this done will help us build a more skilled, diverse workforce and attract talent. We all know that young talent is mobile, and they can go anywhere to build their lives, as so many occupations are online and can be done virtually. To make sure Michigan is the place that young people come to for opportunity, we got to make sure that every person is respected and protected under the law. So I'm really proud of this budget. It lowers costs, it connects people with opportunity, and best of all, it builds on the economic momentum that we have been able to create over these last few years. In 2022, our bipartisan economic development tools helped us bring home $13.5 billion worth of projects. Thank you. I'm going to clap too. We're not clapping for me, we're clapping for us, because this has been a Team Michigan approach, whether it is the MEDC, the private sector, the public sector. We have worked together. Our utility partners, our higher education partners, we've all been a part of making sure that Michigan is competing and winning. None of us does this work alone. But in doing this, we have secured 13,000 good-paying jobs, and we have protected a lot of other jobs that could have gone elsewhere. We made critical bipartisan investments in childcare and education and workforce development. We've established the Michigan Achievement Scholarship. We brought our rainy day fund up to an all-time high. We paid down $14 billion of state debt. We got our credit rating upgraded in the midst of all the challenges that we have confronted. We've driven unemployment down, and we've powered small business growth to historic highs. We can do more in 2023, and we must, and we will. We can put money back in people's pockets and help lower their expenses. We can ensure every child has got an opportunity in a great public education setting. We can build more housing and advance projects that are turning old factories into commercial and residential space. We can help tens of thousands more Michiganders get the skills and education they need to land the good-paying jobs that are growing in Michigan. We can lead the future in cars, we can onshore supply chains in chips, and continue to lead the world in clean energy jobs, which we are right now. And we can compete with anyone and win, because that's what Michiganders do. That's the championship swagger I was talking about in my State of the State, and the underdog spirit. We have got a lot of tailwinds. Billions in federal resources and the CHIPS and Science Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. A strong network of private-public relationships led by folks like the Detroit Regional Chamber, and an economic powerhouse in the city of Detroit. There's exciting stuff happening in the city. I know every one of you sees it, and I know we can all feel it. I was in Washington, D.C. the last few days for the National Governors Association meeting, and in talking to so many of the national media, they went on and on about how what they saw when we hosted the presidential debate at the Fox Theater, it just blew their minds about what is happening in the city of Detroit. First new auto plant in 30 years. That is what partnership from the city level to the state level to the private sector yields. A new gigafactory and homegrown Our Next Energy in Van Buren Township here in Wayne County, creating 2,000 jobs and building long-range batteries. Dakota Kettering plant expansion, creating manufacturing jobs and commitments to local hires. Big Three expansions across several facilities. More on that later. Local projects like the Q Line, I-375, Huntington Place, the Joe Louis Greenway, Ralph Wilson Park, and Book Tower. Education, arts, culture, the reopening of our HBCU, Pensole, the 2024 NFL Draft, 2027 Final Four, Detroit Grand Prix, affordable housing and community revitalization in Brush Park and Corktown, Mexican Town, Cass Corridor, Woodbridge. Innovative private-public partnerships like Michigan Central and the Smart Parking Lab, an autonomous corridor, wireless charging roads, and the #1 startup ecosystem. We've gone from a front page story in Time a decade ago, talking about the struggles, to leading and becoming the world's greatest places last year. We're building something special here in Michigan that people want to be a part of. And this doesn't happen with one person or one entity. It happens when we work together. So I'm proud as I am speaking to people, whether it is in DC or Dayton or Davos, to talk about what's happening in Detroit. The light of this, you knew there was another D coming, right? The D. The light of this renaissance is the people who call this great state home. It's why I feel so optimistic even in some of the most challenging moments, because I know who we are, I know what we're capable of, I see it every single day across our state. It's the honor of my lifetime to serve as the governor of this great state, and for the next 3 years and 11 months, I'm gonna do everything I can to make sure when I hand over the reins to whomever comes next, that is in an even stronger spot than it is today. You've got my commitment and my partnership every step of the way, and I thank you.
Joining Governor Whitmer on stage for a conversation, please welcome the President and Chief Executive Officer of Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan, Dan Lepp.
Shake your hand.
Thank you. Well, it's been an exciting couple of months. I have to say, when I was watching the State of the State, I was struck the metaphor that you put out with Dan Camel at the beginning of the address really, I think, drives right to your point about the grit and the you won't take no for an answer. And I think it's reflective of what we've seen at Alliance, but I think it's reflective of what's going on in the state too. One of the things that struck me about the budget, it is, I assume by design, very multi-generational in the sense of, we all have, as you do, as I do, families in about 3 different generations. And the budget really takes different places for different people at different times. How does that, doing that, and how does that impact, our competitiveness, would you say, around the world and around the country?
I think every employer in this room, every person in this room is thinking about how do we make sure that Michigan's competitive and how we attract talent into Michigan and keep talent here, whether it's my kids who are at the University of Michigan right now and they're going to be making decisions about where to build their lives in the coming years, or it is a young person who grew up in Grand Rapids and is maybe at Ohio State University. I mean, questionable judgment there, but how do we get them to come back to Michigan? Or how do we get people who went off to Silicon Valley to bring their talent back to Michigan and make sure that Detroit and the greater Detroit area is a place where people want to come to? We are an older state. We do have a lot of people who are living their golden years here in Michigan, and that's a wonderful thing. But we got to make sure that we've got the schools to support young families, that we've got the policies that young people are looking for. It's not just about my kids, but I often, use them as an example. My daughters, were waiting to see what would happen with reproductive rights. My oldest is a lesbian, and her decision about where to make her life is going to be dependent on whether or not she's got full protections and rights under the law. And as her mom, I want her to live in a state where she can live her true self and be successful, and I want that for every person. It's not just about my kids, right? So whether it's age-friendly policies where you can age in place and have the supports that you need, or it is for people in their 50s like I am to make sure that Michigan is competitive and there are job opportunities and upskilling chances for people who maybe see their job going away but have got a lot of years in them where they can be productive and need a good job, but they just need some skills. Whereas for young people to come too, our budget is a statement of who we are. It is a statement of our values. And that's why these investments from early childhood and daycare to age-friendly policies, every person's important in this state.
Definitely. The other thing I want to ask you about is, and I know you can't talk about what's coming in an hour and a half, but we'll all see it when it comes. But I think I've been struck too by the amount of economic, the MEDC has really stepped up in the work that they've done and what Quentin's done. And as you become this battery hub, it also will mean you're going to continue to manufacture cars around that battery hub. And I don't want to talk about any specifics because I know you can't, but long-term impact is enormous.
It is, and I think one of the things, having been in the legislature, I've got a lot of respect for the people that run and serve in our House and Senate. And it is a whirlwind. There are a lot of brand new members. Last term, when I was working with Republican leadership, they were in the majority in both chambers, I was really trying to get Democrats to embrace our economic development strategy, and it was difficult. There's no slam dunks in the legislature, and there are people on the ends and on the spectrum who are going to oppose economic development no matter what. So it's about talking to and doing the best we can to educate people. But in EVs, the heaviest part of the car is now the battery. And so if we're not making batteries, all the other components can move to where the battery is made. And that's why we've got to compete and we've got to win battery plants and opportunities. And so the mindset that, these companies have always been here, they always will be, is something that we've got to overcome. And so everyone in this room, I think, can be helpful in that, in the conversations that you're having, in the education effort. But we don't, despite our rich history in mobility, we don't have a lock on the future of mobility. We have to compete and we have to win. And economic development was not my forte before I became governor. And now, I'm in a position where I see what we are up against. I see what other states are offering. Michigan is one of only 2 states in the country that can't throw cash at a company. I mean, think about this. Mississippi, they throw $400 million of cash at companies. We are not allowed to do that. So what we can do is have a great workforce. We can have great partnerships. We can have sites that are ready. We can do a lot of things around R&D, other ways to make sure that Michigan's competitive. And we've been successful in doing that. But we have to work at it every single day.
Yeah, it's nothing taking for granted because anybody can go anywhere at any time if they choose, so, including businesses. Talk a little bit, you mentioned it in your remarks, you did make a significant effort to move to bipartisanship in your first term. This is a different ballgame now because it's the first time, if I remember correctly, since 1982 when the Democrats controlled both houses of the legislature, which is many generations ago. But as you said, it's essential to getting things done. How do you transcend this to get to the point you want to get to? Because it's not easy.
No, and right after the election, so this is my lucky place right here, Motor City, is where we gathered both my elections and had great outcomes both. I'm so grateful to the people of Michigan for giving me a chance to do this for 4 more years. I truly am. I also am cognizant that while we've made history with the win and flipping both chambers of our legislature, it's only happened 4 times in 130 years in Michigan. And as you said, the last time was 40 years ago. So I'm cognizant that it is a 2-seat majority. It's not a mandate. And I have told my friends in the legislature, I don't want to hear anyone using that word. It's an affirmation that we're focused on the right things. And we've got to stay focused on the right things. Yes, we do what we said we were going to do. We live our values. But I still expect and want the vast majority of things that get to my desk to be bipartisan supported. I took an oath to serve every person in the state. I'm going to, I know we're not all going to agree on everything all the time, but I think that we're better when there's a diverse group of people with a diverse group of opinions and vantage points and experiences around the table. And that's why, tomorrow we'll have a quadrant meeting and I'll be bringing little Valentine's cookies for all 4 of them. And try, I'm not baking them though. I'm trying to get some goodwill, so that would be counterproductive. But if we're not talking to one another, we're never going to be able to find common ground. And so this slim majority I'm grateful for, and these are wonderful leaders. Nothing's going to be easy. It never is, and that's okay. We just got to partner and roll up our sleeves and do the work.
Great, great. I'm going to flip over to healthcare, which is a passion of yours. It certainly is a passion of mine, in making sure people have affordable healthcare. One of the things you mentioned is the cost of insulin, and I know the President mentioned it in his State of the Union address. We've been working with our folks to make sure our customers have more affordable, because it's hitting everybody. I just wanted you, if you want to comment on where you go with this, what you do.
I think, I think a place where we're really aligned is we're just trying to make sure that every person can improve the quality of their health through greater access to the medicines that they need to live. We are not the healthiest state in the nation. We've got work to do, and whether it's education or accessibility or ensuring that there's equitable opportunity, not just for grocery stores, but for jobs and for income, all of these things are related. And that's why, the cost of insulin is remarkably high compared to around the rest of the world.
Right.
And so I think that states can lead, and that we should, but always, mindful of how do we increase access. And this is one area, but maternal health and equities around maternal health, this is something that we've been focused on. Sickle cell, there are a lot of different things in the budget that we have really tried to put some emphasis on and solve for, because this is what perpetuates the inequitable outcomes for people.
Right, and if you don't do it early, the results 10 years from now end up costing billions of dollars to everyone, let alone bad health. So both of those things, that's right. Let's talk about Detroit a little bit. Obviously, and you mentioned this, that the state is inextricably tied to Detroit, like it or not for some people, but mostly like it for all the people in this room, I would say. What do you sense, your sense of core cities? Because it's not just Detroit. It's Lansing, it's Grand Rapids, it's Flint, it's Saginaw, of what we can do for core cities moving forward.
So as we wrote this budget, we stayed focused on, I think, the fundamentals, right? I still think that there's work to do when it comes to transit and transportation, but I'm not leading with that. I think that's got to be a locally led effort, but one that I do think would be helpful. The education budget, in the midst of everything the last 4 years, I feel like, we've all had so much crises to confront that maybe some of the pieces of what we accomplish aren't generally known. But one of the things I'm really pleased with and proud of is that in the midst of everything, we closed the gap between school districts. So there was this historic gap where, just as an example, Detroit Public Schools got less money per child than districts in Oakland County. Not all districts, because Pontiac, right, there's discrepancies even within Oakland County, we know. But we closed that gap. 4 governors had worked on it, but we got it done in the middle of the pandemic with a Republican-led legislature. We were able to do that. Now, that's equal, but we built in equity on top of that by putting more resources into English language learners and kids with special needs, kids at risk, CTE programs. These are things that we create that equitable opportunity. So that's a piece of addressing a lot of the issues in our bigger cities. But it's also, I think, a real start, long overdue start. Now, there's more work to do to improve outcomes, and that's got to be where we all partner and lock arms, because our outcomes are lagging. They did pre-pandemic, and the pandemic was a massive setback. In an ordinary summer, there's a learning loss for all kids from June to September. It's always bigger for kids in tougher socioeconomic situations. The pandemic dwarfs the average summer. And so there's going to be a lot of work to get kids back on track. And that's why I didn't even tee it up that way, but My Kids Back on Track is the individualized tutoring program that we have funded in this budget so that our kids can get the individualized teaching and tutoring that they need.
Yeah, oftentimes that's the difference between success and failure, that if you can get that intense. I've seen it, so I think it's a great part of the budget. Talk about the SOAR fund a little bit, and I know that's already attracted several heavy investments. Where does that go from here?
Well, I'm trying to make sure that we've got a perpetual source to ensure that the SOAR fund we've got the tools we need to compete. Right now, we've been making individual appropriations. It's cumbersome, it can be slow, it can get caught up in politics. And as we think about kind of the bigger picture in Michigan being competitive and ensuring that we get the opportunity, and it's not just big projects, these are dollars that can be used for upskilling, that can be used to help businesses of a variety of sizes all across the state. Having a sustainable source of resources for it is really important. So that's one of the things that I'm trying to work on with the legislature right now.
Great. I noticed over the weekend there was a story around, and the last couple of weeks, around the fighter squadron at Selfridge, and I know you happen to be in Washington this weekend, and how's that going?
So we know that the Air Force is making determinations about where to recapitalize fighter missions. We are fortunate to have people like Senator Peters in the important position he's in, Senator Stabenow. They have been fierce advocates for Michigan for a long time. From Carl Levin to Debbie Stabenow to Gary Peters, we've got some of the best people we could ask for. We also know that they don't plan at the moment to do one for one. So they retire a mission and then they replace a mission. So it's a competitive moment. We've hosted the Air Force many times. Secretary Kendall was here. We showed him around Selfridge. We had incredible partnership from our delegation to Hackle and Candace Miller, who we tagged in, and a variety of local leaders to show that we are all in. And when you look at Camp Grayling to Alpena to Battle Creek to Selfridge, we got something to offer no one else can. 4-season training, incredible airspace, international airspace, and water as well. And I think after what happened yesterday, maybe strengthens our case. But we're working really hard to make sure that as they reinvest in fighter missions, that we have one. It's important to our defense economy. It's important to our homeland security. So for all these reasons, we've pulled out all the stops. We've gotten their attention. We even put an ad in Stars and Stripes, which is a magazine everyone in the military reads, and I got a call right after that happened. So we got their attention, and I'm working over the administration, and I know that Senator Stabenow and Peters are doing an incredible amount of work too to make sure we get that mission.
Yeah, it's a big deal. If we can pull it off, that'd be great. One question: you were on a trade mission to Northern Europe and spoke at the Davos conference. Talk about that a little bit, how that was, and how Michigan was taken, for example.
It was really interesting. So I did some economic development meetings before the Davos conference, and I was in Oslo, Norway. You'll love this story. I was meeting with a company called Hydro Norsk, and they have an investment in Cassopolis, Michigan. And I was meeting with all the leadership of Hydro Norsk. They want to grow, but we're competing with other states. They've got a presence in some other states. And I said, tell me, why Cassopolis? Like, what was it? And they said, well, they were very complimentary of our MEDC and the team that was working it. They said, but it was one conversation that really was powerful. It was the city manager from Cassopolis, Michigan. And I share that with you because what an incredible thing to learn. We're going to be acknowledging the city manager, but I think that it's really tells you how that from the granular to the partnership at the state level to all the work that we're doing can be impactful. And that's why I say, Michiganders are humble, and it's a wonderful quality, but we should have a little swagger like the Texans do, because we got a lot to offer. And if every one of us is on Team Michigan and telling the story, I don't see how anyone can beat us. We also had dinner that night at a restaurant. Oh yeah, thanks. That's for the city manager of Cassopolis. So later that night, we had a bite to eat with another company that we were courting, and we looked at the menu, and Founders Beer out of Grand Rapids, Michigan was on the menu. In Oslo, which of course we pointed out to show Michigan is a world-class place. But the Davos thing was very interesting. When the list of who was attending came out, we were inundated. People wanted to talk to us about what was happening in Michigan. And so I took that as a really wonderful sign that people are taking notice. The one thing I didn't anticipate was that as a governor from a state in the United States, I would have to be the one to defend the CHIPS Act and the Inflation Reduction Act, which the Europeans, they're all thrilled that we're in the competition again and we're leading into clean energy and climate, but they didn't really like the competition at the same time, and I just laughed and defended it. But I'm proud of what we were able to accomplish, and the interest in Michigan, we have done a ton of follow-up, and I think it's gonna, that's how things happen.
Yeah, right,
so
absolutely.
It was really eye-opening.
That's great. That's super. Well, we're just about out of time, so any other comments you have for the crowd?
Just I thank you for Sandy and the Chamber for the incredible work that you do and all the members of this organization. When I say if we're all selling Team Michigan, we can't lose, I mean it. And so I'm grateful for the work that you do and really excited about what I think is on the horizon for us all. So thank you, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Great. Thanks, Governor, for your time. It's been a great event. Always appreciate you being with us.
Distinguished guests, this concludes our program. Thank you for attending the 2023 State of the State Address to the Business Community, presented by Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan.
Sustainability is central to everything we do at Enbridge. That's why we've committed to net zero GHG emissions by the year 2050. We deliver the energy that fuels quality of life, safely, responsibly, and sustainably.